Welcome to our episode of Reach Minds, Thoughts for Your Life's Journey podcast. In today's session, we're going to explore how the landscape and perspective of mental health and wellness has evolved through the different generations. Each generation has something valuable to contribute to our understanding of mental well-being. From the resilience of the silent generation to the advocacy of the Millennials and Gen Z, who are often more vocal about their needs. Are there things we can learn from each other? We'll examine these different approaches, look at what works, what's changed, and how can we combine the best of both worlds to support our mental well-being, healing for all. Today, I'm joined by Sophia Otasowie, who is based in Los Angeles, California, and serves as the Director of Programs at the Olive Support Services, a nonprofit that provides vulnerable communities with evidence-based classes for behavioral wellness. She shares about the mental health from her experience working with OSS and as a national mental health first aid instructor. She is a two-time graduate from the University of Pennsylvania and has a background in education of social policy and research. With a commitment to empowering individuals and families, she looks forward to sharing insights that promote awareness, resilience, and above all, practical support. Welcome, Sophia.
Thank you so much. That was a great intro.
This podcast of well-being and mental health is so contemporary now. So for me, I'm dying to dig into it from your perspective and your experience. What got you into the health and well-being as a practitioner?
I truthfully just stumbled into it. I started volunteering at Olive Support Services because my mom founded the organization. And I was a freshman in college helping kids with tutoring and academic support, enrichment activities. And then the other portion of our organization was serving adults who needed those court recognized classes to regain custody of their kids. And so I'm getting to witness the challenges of the adults and the children alongside each other. And so it started sparking my interest about parent education and more formally about well-being. And then I became a mental health first aid instructor. I went back to school. And so I started appreciating, specifically in the world of early childhood education, how much socio-emotional learning and well-being were part of that curriculum. And it gave me the opportunity to start hosting trainings and having conversations like this. And so I've just been excited to continue following that road wherever it leads me. And so I'm really grateful to be able to be having this conversation today.
One of the things I touched on in my opening was understanding mental health and wellness across the generations. Tell me your sort of perspective on this.
I'm so grateful that I live in the generation that I do. I think I'm also very heavily influenced through my parents by the perspectives of the generations before me. I think currently, just like a lot of other disciplines, there's a lot of information that's more accessible today than there was in the past. And so I encourage people not to be harsh with themselves as we learn more. But with all the information that we have now, it feels like more people are open and accessible to the information that they have. People are more comfortable saying things like, I was talking to my therapist. They're not uncomfortable disclosing that they use mental health supports or that they have mental health challenges. They actually are encouraging other people to make use of those supports as well, and they're advocates for each other. There's also a very common language in this generation, sometimes not always correct, but we have a lot of secondhand information about mental health and a higher sensitivity, I think, for the way life experiences affect our mental health and are promoting the ways that we use self-care to improve our mental health.
How do you think that varies from maybe the baby boomers from your perspective?
I think the previous generations have a very strong emphasis on resilience, which is becoming more of a buzzword again these days, but sometimes to a fault. There was a heavy emphasis on being resilient, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps is the phrase we always hear. And it didn't allow people permission to quote unquote be weak, to have vulnerable moments like they do in the present. And so while Gen Z, millennials have greater emphasis on the ways that we should support ourselves to continue to be resilient. I think the previous generation could have benefited from the opportunities to rest, to refuel themselves so that they could continue to be strong.
I agree with you because if I think about the word self-compassion, I
Mm,
certainly growing up as a baby boomer, I don't think even as an adult, except in the last 10, 15 years, I've
mm,
come to embrace that word. I don't even think it was around as a concept of taking care of yourself. You just got on with
yeah,
things, really. And I guess looking at it from a generational perspective, this might cause some conflict because as a baby boomer, they might look at it, oh, why can't they just get on with it? They're just pansy. They're not hard built. Have you come across any of those kind of commentary from other people? You're
absolutely. I
laughing.
think
Yeah.
I think I feel the wrestle in myself sometimes because I was raised by very strong, accomplishment driven Nigerian parents. And there are all these stereotypes that Nigerian parents just want their kids to be doctors, engineers, lawyers. That's it, which I completely understand. But I think there's something so fascinating about the fact that people can have really high expectations for themselves and grace for other people. Generally speaking, I see that as a trend with baby boomers, older generations. And it's easy to start looking at these younger generations talking about positive self talk or self care, mindfulness. And you're just like, oh my goodness, why are we all so soft? But if we all had this hard exterior of putting forth a front that everything is okay and that we can always be working at 100%, it makes it really hard to give grace or permission for anybody else to work at 90 that day or 85 that day. And so if we're all holding ourselves to this standard and never talking about how difficult it is, it's perpetuating the harder life and poor mental well-being for those older generations. So I'm grateful that the two generations are mixing, and even if there's some friction at the beginning, hopefully things are rubbing off on each other.
I hope so too, because it makes a world a better place. There's more complexity and more choices and options that you can pursue. Now, what are some of the kind of subtle nuances do you think you're observing and noticing in the health and well-being world today?
This generation, I'll say millennials and Gen Z, while we are super open to talking about mental health, I think one of the downsides that I'm seeing is that the phrase that I'm hearing online is over therapized. That we use a lot of this language and it can be really easy to justify negative behaviors. There's words for everything like that. I'm prioritizing self care. No, you're just being lazy. You're quitting again.
Yeah.
And it allows people to get away with not actually problem solving, not actually coping or learning new skills to be resilient. But there's language of self protection constantly. And so people can self diagnose without the actual support or insights of a professional. And instead of developing strategies to grow and adapt, they use them as reasons to avoid phone calls because social anxiety. I'm not going to do this because that's out of my comfort zone. And that's not what therapy was meant to do. We were supposed to gain the skills to understand ourselves, one, and learn how to grow from there instead of using that language as a reason to justify the places that we are. We're supposed to be getting better, not getting stuck.
Have you seen any other kind of subtle trends and patterns that probably didn't exist maybe 20 years ago that you're seeing now?
I think one of the things that I really appreciate about this conversation about well being is that in present day, we think more about mental health in the same way that older generations think about physical health. And so we see our doctors, we appreciate the insights that they bring, and we know that if we get diet and exercise and sleep, our body should work well. And the younger generation is also recognizing that if I go outside, if I pray, if I make time for mindfulness, if I have good food and positive self talk and good community connections, I will also feel better. Whereas if you ask an older generation, why do you feel so grumpy? I don't know. Have you eaten anything? Nope. Have you talked to anyone? Nope. Have you prayed? Nope. And so we shouldn't be shocked that our mental health is very clearly connected to the ways that we behave and engage in the world. And so I think this generation is doing a good job of seeing our mental health as something that we can be proactive in taking care of as well.
But I also hear you saying that there's an interconnection with our bodies and our minds as well. And there's more permission giving that if you're mentally not well, anxiety, you can take some recourse in addressing that because it may manifest itself in a very physical way as well. And I guess the generations that I'm from, if you broke your arm, they go, oh, poor you, poor you. Yeah, if you said, oh, I've got depression, everybody would go out the window or go through the door going, oh. So there is a more integration, I think it seems to be, between maybe every generation. I don't know, because I don't have enormous conversations with people about the holistic mind and body. I realize it, but I'm not there as a practitioner. So have you noticed there's sort of more integration between the two?
Yeah, one of the things that I teach in the mental health first aid training is the biggest takeaway is that we want to give people hope. And across generations, I think we can look at mental health the way that we have. Let me bring up COVID. I remember what it was like those first couple months of lockdown, and we were like hand sanitizing all of our groceries and leaving them outside because we didn't want to get sick. Whereas now, if people said, oh, I had COVID, we know that there are vaccines, there are ways that we can get better, and we have more intervention, we have more information about it. And I think people have forgotten that mental health has also progressed in the same way. If back in the day, 200 years ago, people said they had depression, we knew that this was going to be a cause for all kinds of upset in the community, the risks that could happen, the way that mental health was treated, the stigma associated would cause a bunch of upset because there was an expectation that if you are not mentally well, you can't contribute to society, you can't be trusted, there's this perception of weakness. Whereas today, there's a greater understanding that if you have depression, you can do things and get better. So if I say I have a cold, no one is prepping my grave today because we know that there are things that we can do and I can get better. And so I want people to think about mental health the same way. There is hope. There is the expectation that if you have a mental health issue and you get connected to the right resources, you will get better.
Absolutely. And I think you will get better and you won't be institutionalized, because that's what used to happen. If you got really ill, then you would be institutionalized. I think there are so many mental acts that we have in the UK. I don't know what you have in the US, but I'm sure. What role do you think technology plays in mental health, and both positively and negatively for different age groups?
Yeah, I love the fact that technology often gets a bad rap, so we will get to there, but positively, I have met so many amazing people through social media who have similar stories to myself or similar interests. And so technology provides an opportunity for people to encounter people who are similar to them and build community, not feel so isolated, normalizing experiences that sometimes can make people feel isolated. So it makes a really big world feel much smaller. The dark side of that is that some people feel like online community can replace in-person community, and it truly cannot. Someone made a joke that the internet makes you feel close to people who are far from you and far from people who are close to you. And so
Wise statement.
Right? It's such a distraction and it can fuel, technology, phone addiction is a real thing that's occurring. The dopamine hits, it's changing the way that we engage in the real world. So there is a downside to that. However, as far as like mental health information being shared online, I'm grateful for the way that people are bringing awareness, but there's also, I encourage people to exercise caution because just like medical advice shared online means that you should still consult a medical professional. This isn't a substitute for medical advice. I need people to exercise the same level of caution when it comes to mental health. Without the without the insights of a mental health professional, it's really easy for people to take mental health information that can perpetuate unhealthy behaviors or emphasize beliefs that are already held. So like the really resilient, hardworking person can hear information about resilience and think they need to just put their head down and keep working harder. And the person who's really prone to giving up can hear something about triggers and just say, that triggers me and I'm going to lean back and I won't engage. And so people are acting as their own therapists and choosing what kind of therapeutic practices they want to listen to, ascribe to without the expertise of a professional. So instead of being better adjusted, more resilient, sometimes we can just default to seeking things that validate our own perspectives.
So I know that in today's world, there are lots of choices and choices around self-diagnosis. And I guess in some ways that's is a positive and a negative, as you're maybe saying at the same time. People might read a book and go, oh yeah, that's me. And I guess how do you regulate this? How do you regulate it? Because there is so much information
Yeah,
around out there.
yeah. I'll start with the things that are most accessible. Generally speaking, social media is an amazing place to start getting information about things that you didn't know. But I would encourage people not to immediately take up everything that sounds good as practice or as the truth, the sole perspective to have on something. And so I would encourage that if people are already spending that much time on social media anyway, look at other sources of information because a psychology journal might have a little bit more authority to make some judgments about what would be best practice for someone reading this who resonates, for whom the topic resonates. And so that might be a better route to go than just listening to someone's Instagram story and saying, I have a new diagnosis for myself. Less accessible, but becoming more accessible these days is actual access to a healthcare professional. There are lots of nonprofits that I work with that provide free mental health counseling or support. There are a lot of crisis lines that people can access where professionals are on the other side. Of course, those are reserved for crises, and we don't want people to have to get to crisis before they see a healthcare professional. And so now there are apps that connect you to therapists. There are ways that people are trying to make therapy more accessible and more affordable for those who don't have that directly in their environment.
Now, do you see some gender differences around health and well-being?
The immediate answer that came to mind is thinking about all the old men who are still skipping their healthcare appointment. But generally speaking, what I've seen in the social services world is that it's very female dominated, and women are more vulnerable and willing to be vulnerable with other people about the mental health challenges. I think we're finally getting permission. Mothers are getting a spotlight like they never had before to talk about how difficult it is to have a job or run a business, have kids, and trying to be present for them and meet all their social emotional needs and making sure that they're taking care of academics. I hear a lot about that in the parenting sphere. I hear a lot about weaponized incompetence on the behalf of men who, and that basically what they're describing is that men can sometimes decide that my incompetence in this area will allow me to keep getting away with not participating, or the invisible mental load it takes to make certain things happen for your families. If you ask someone to go to the grocery store and then they're asking you, can you tell me where in the store this can be found? What brand does the kid like? Why do you not know your child's sizes? Things like that. So I hear a very strong skew towards women being both the more resilient gender, the more mentally taxed gender, but they're also being the more vulnerable. I love when I do see a lot less frequently, but when I see men holding space for mental health and being vulnerable with each other, talking about their physical and mental health needs. And while I know that a lot of the needs are the same across the board as far as what helps us to be okay as human beings, I think there is something unique about having a space where you know that you can bring the differences out, where women are having their women's group, men are having their men's groups. People in the LGBTQ community are also having their own spaces to talk about unique challenges to that group and how this group of people and experts can help support their mental well-being in a different way.
I think happy society, happy future, I guess, in some ways.
Hope, yeah.
Sophia, this has been very informative and I've enjoyed our conversation. Is there any last words of wisdoms you would like to share?
I just would love to encourage people that there is no quick fix. We need to take care of our physical and mental health consistently for us to see a difference. And we shouldn't be shocked if we feel awful if we're not taking care of our basic needs. And we can make sure that we're doing the same across the board and advocating for our friends to do the same. Both older and younger generations have the power to do that. And so hopefully as we spend time with each other, we're beginning to rub off on each other and both of us are getting stronger together. So I encourage you to mix your community, find people who think differently than you and see what you can learn from them. I think we'll all be better off for it.
Thank you, Sophia, for someone so young with such wisdom.
Thank you so much.
If you enjoy listening, tell a friend.